This is our new theme, and I'm very excited about it. And today I'm going to briefly introduce it to you, and the posters begin to unpack some of it for us. The other picture that you would have seen would also have been this one. Many of us trust in God, but what has God entrusted to us? How many of you here are trustees? You don't have to put your hand up, but I would guess quite a few of you. It might be a family trust. It might be a charitable trust, an NPO. It might be an asset protection trust or trading trust. The concept trustee in general refers to any person who holds property, authority, or a position of trust and responsibility for the benefit of another. As you would know, a trust in our society is a legal entity in its own right. So if I create a trust for the protection of my own assets, and I'm the trustee, in a sense, I'm responsible to myself, for myself, legally. It's an interesting thought, and a good one. You see, in a sense, we are all trustees. In Genesis, right in the beginning, chapter 1, we hear these words. God says, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful, increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky and every living creature that moves on the ground." God saw all that he made, and it was very good. It's the only time he says very good. The rest of the time it's just good. You see, God made us in God's image as trustees of his creation with God and for God, of all. And not just that, we are heirs. You and I are heirs of all that is God's. Romans reminds us of that. Paul reminds us when he says in Romans 8, "For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. And if the Spirit you received does not make you slaves, so that you live in fear again, rather the Spirit you received makes you adopted into sonship." The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. And now if we are God's children, then we are heirs. Heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ. Indeed, if we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. You, sitting here, need to remember that you are an adopted son and daughter of God. And as a result, you are co-heirs with Jesus of everything that is God's. We are trustees of our own destiny with Christ and trustees of God's kingdom. Is that exciting or is that daunting an idea? Sorry, back to that. That is our theme for the next season of preaching. What does it mean to be entrusted? We want to explore it in a whole lot of exciting and different kind of ways. But the important concept I want to leave with us today is that as trustees, we act for and behalf of those of the trust, of that which we have been entrusted with. In our case, we are entrusted with God's kingdom. And that includes our very selves, our own bodies, and everything about us. Paul says in Romans 12, "For by the grace given to me, I say to each of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. For just as each of you has a body, and your body has many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ, though we many form one body, and each belongs to the other, we have different gifts according to the grace given us. You see, as trustees, we are appointed as true honor trust with different roles to play, different parts that we bring to our sense of responsibility. Some roles are unique and some are common. Common roles we all have, as Genesis reminds us, to care for God's creation, to care for our families, to care for ourselves, to make use of the earth, to farm it, use its resources wisely. But they're unique roles that each one of you has. And your unique roles, Paul describes in the next verse. Just some of them to whet your appetite. He says, so if your gift is prophesying, prophesy in accordance with your faith. If your gift is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. We are challenged, all of us, to discover our giftings always and to do it. Now, the big error we make as Christians is thinking that these giftings and these lists are what we do only in church. Part of our challenge about being trustees is that it's more important what we're doing outside church as God's trustees than what we're doing in church. So hold that thought. You see, it's all about being blessed so that we can be blessings. It's all about being entrusted to be good trustees. So when God started his big relationship with the nation that eventually became Israel, was with a man called Abram, and he changed his name eventually to Abraham. This is how Genesis 12 records that first covenant, the start of that first relationship. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. And I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." Abram was blessed to be a blessing. Abraham was blessed to be a blessing. And so much of what we call Old Testament history is really just the playing out of that. When the new nation that was formed, who was blessed by God, was blessings to others, they discovered their own prosperity. They discovered that things were well for them. But the Bible records many occasions when they kept their blessings to themselves, when they were not blessings to others. And the records show that life for them was not good. When they failed, they suffered. David himself understood this hugely in his prayer. And we know a lot of this prayer because we say it together, parts of it, in our liturgical services. But listen to it as Chronicles records it. David's praised the Lord in the presence of the whole assembly, saying, "Praise be to you, Lord, the God of our father Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Yours, Lord, is the greatness, the power, the glory, and the majesty and the splendor. For everything in heaven and on earth is yours." Ring a bell? But he says this, "Wealth and honor come from you. You are the ruler of all things. In your hands are strength and power to exalt and to give strength to all. And now, our God, we give you thanks and we praise your glorious name. But who am I and who are our people that we should be able to give as generously as this? Everything comes from you, and we have given only what comes from your hand. I know, my God, that you test the heart and are pleased with integrity. And all these things I have given willingly and with honest intent. And now I have seen with joy how willingly your people who are here have given to you. David understood that all we give to God is really what God has already entrusted to us. We're just returning what is God's back to God. This is the idea that we're playing around with. And that was the core message of both the parable of the talents and the parable of the virgins that we heard this morning. They needed to be ready. They were entrusted with money or with the preparedness and the oils. Were they ready, using their resources wisely for God or not? That was the test. They were entrusted. Were they good trustees? One of the verses in our Old Testament reading says this, Isaiah, "Your people will rebuild ancient ruins and raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings." You see, good trustees seek justice, healing, and bring building attitude to community. They are community builders. Good trustees rebuild what was lost. Good trustees determine the future and leave a legacy. And so we want to play around with that over the next while. We want to ask ourselves, how can I discover what I have been entrusted with? What are the blessings God has blessed me with? We want to also ask, so how can I be a good trustee? How can I multiply these? Parable of the talents, he was given 10, he made 10 more. With God and for God. What does that look like? And how can I give back, as David said, joyfully, all that is already God's anyway, that God has given me in trust? How can I live out my calling individually? And what does it mean for us as a community to live out our calling? So how can we become blessings to others and in so doing build God's kingdom? And so as different preachers share with you, this is where we're going. This is what we're unpacking. It's a kind of personal journey, but it's also a corporate journey of discovery. And I'm really excited about it, and I hope you are. So join us. Amen.